My name is Dorothy Anderson. I'm 28 years old, and for 5 years I thought love meant patience. I thought if I just kept giving my time, my support, my heart, eventually it would be enough. But patience, I learned, can also be a very slow way to drown. When Sean and I first started dating, everything felt effortless. He was charming, ambitious, always chasing a new idea. I admired that about him, the way his mind buzzed with energy, the way he talked about building something big one day. I was the quiet one, the steady one, the boring half of our couple, as he used to joke, though I always laughed it off back then. I worked as a software developer for a mid-sized company. Nothing glamorous, but it was stable. It paid for rent, groceries, and sometimes even his projects. When Sean's startup pitch didn't go through, I covered our bills. When he quit his job because it was limiting his creativity, I encouraged him. He said he just needed someone who believed in him. So I did, fully, blindly. In the beginning, he loved that about me, how grounded I was. You keep me sane, he used to say, wrapping his arms around me after a long day of failed meetings. But somewhere along the way, sane started sounding like static, and grounded started to mean stuck. It happened slowly, almost imperceptibly. First, he began staying out later, networking events, he'd say, or meeting potential investors. Then came the new people. Especially one, Ethan, his new best friend. Ethan was everything Sean admired, loud, confident, and perpetually half-drunk on his own ego. He made easy money trading crypto and loved talking about freedom and taking risks. One night I overheard them in our living room. Ethan, man, your girlfriend's sweet, but she's holding you back. You need someone who matches your energy. Sean laughing. Yeah. Dorothy's great, but she doesn't get it. She plays it too safe. The words hit me like a cold draft through an open window. I wasn't supposed to hear them, but I did. I remember my hand tightening around the mug I was holding, my knuckles white. That night I didn't say anything. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every "you keep me sane" that suddenly sounded more like "you keep me small." A few weeks later, Sean started talking about someone new, Mila. He said she was a crypto consultant, and brilliant, the kind of woman who made things happen. I could tell from the way his eyes lit up that this was different. He showed me her Instagram glossy photos in luxury hotels, motivational quotes, in every caption, all tagged with hashtag self-made and hashtag boss life. She's helping me with a potential partnership, he said. But the way he said it, the quiet pride in his tone, made something twist in my chest. That night, while he scrolled through Mila's feed, I tried to start a conversation. Dorothy. Hey, maybe we should take a trip together sometime. Just us. Sean without looking up. We can't afford that, Dorothy. Not right now. You know how tight things are. Dorothy. Right, of course. But 2 nights later, I saw Mila post a story, her and Sean clinking glasses at a rooftop bar. The caption read, "Big moves coming soon." He hadn't mentioned that meeting. Still, I tried to understand. That's what I did understand, forgive, adapt. Every time he grew distant, I'd tell myself he was just stressed. Every time he snapped, I told myself he didn't mean it. Love makes excuses until one day it runs out of them. One Saturday evening, I found myself waiting at home while he was out again talking business. The clock hit midnight, then 1. He didn't text, didn't call, and for the first time in years I felt something new, not worry, not anger, just emptiness, like my heart had gone quiet from exhaustion. I stood up, walked to the mirror, and studied my reflection. Tired eyes, hair tied up, a half-finished glass of wine beside the sink. You're safe, Dorothy, I whispered to myself. Too safe. The next morning, he came home with a grin, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. Sean. You wouldn't believe who I ran into last night. Mila knows this investor who might, Dorothy cutting him off softly. Sean, do you still love me? He blinked, caught off guard. What kind of question is that? Dorothy? Just answer it. Sean, after a long pause. Of course I do, but sometimes I feel like you're holding me back. He said it so casually, like it was a fact. Not cruel, not emotional, just true in his mind, and somehow that hurt the most. That night I sat alone in the dark living room. His words echoed in my head until they lost all shape, dissolving into white noise. He's right, a small voice whispered inside me. You've been standing still while he's been running away. But another voice, quieter, stronger, whispered back, No. You've been building something real while he's chasing illusions. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was ending or maybe had ended long ago. The air in our apartment felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Every photo on the wall looked like a lie. And somewhere deep down, I already knew the next time he said I was holding him back, I wouldn't stop him from leaving. It was a Friday evening when Sean asked if I wanted to go with him to a networking party. He said it'd be good for me to meet people who think bigger. His tone made it sound like an opportunity, but I couldn't tell if he meant for him or for me to prove something. I said yes anyway. Maybe I was still clinging to the faint hope that in a crowded room full of strangers, he'd still look at me like I was his home. The party was at a glass-walled villa overlooking the city, the kind of place that smells like champagne and insecurity. Everyone there looked like they'd been filtered through an app. Sharp clothes, hollow smiles, hungry eyes. Ethan was there, of course, laughing too loud as usual. And beside him, radiant under the string lights, was Mila. She looked exactly like her online photos, maybe even better. Hair like liquid gold dress, like it cost more than my car, and a confidence that filled every inch of the space. Sean's hand twitched at his side when he saw her like muscle memory. He didn't even try to hide how his eyes followed her. Dorothy internal. That was the moment I realized I wasn't at a party. I was standing on the edge of my own erasure. I spent the first hour nursing a drink, pretending to enjoy small talk with people who only spoke in self-congratulations. Sean drifted from group to group, laughing too easily, his arm occasionally brushing Mila's. When he finally made it back to me, I asked quietly, "Dorothy." "Having fun, Sean." "It's good to be around people who push me, you know." He said it with a faint smile, but his eyes were already searching for someone else across the room. I nodded, pretending I didn't feel that invisible distance stretching wider with every word. Then came the moment that split my life cleanly in two. I had stepped outside for some air. The music thudded softly through the glass doors, the city lights flickering below. That's when I heard them voices from the garden corner just beyond the hedge. Sean and Mila. They weren't whispering. They didn't need to. Mila. "You're wasting potential, Sean. You have a mind for big things, but she doesn't. She's comfortable." Sean laughing. "Yeah, Dorothy's good, but she's safe. Predictable. It's like she's allergic to risk." Mila. "Exactly. You need someone who matches your drive." Their laughter melted into the night air, cruel, casual, intimate. And for a moment I couldn't breathe. When I finally stepped into view, Sean froze mid-sentence. Mila's smirk stayed put, her eyes sliding over me like I was part of the wallpaper. "Dorothy, predictable, huh?" "Sean." "Dorothy?" "Wait, it's not what you think, Dorothy." "Oh, it's exactly what I think. You've been practicing this speech for weeks." He started to speak, but Mila interrupted with a soft, amused tone. "Mila, relax, Sean. She deserves honesty. We were just talking about ambition." Dorothy coldly. "And you were the expert, I assume." Her smirk faltered just a little. "Sean, Dorothy, please don't make a scene. Dorothy." A scene, I almost laughed. "Sean, you've been making one for months. I just finally stopped playing the extra." A few guests nearby had noticed. Phones lowered. Conversations dimmed. Sean's jaw tightened. He hated losing control of a narrative. Sean snapping, "You see? This is exactly what I mean. You can't handle my world. You make everything heavy." Dorothy. "Your world." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "You mean the one where you pretend to be someone else until the lights turn off?" He flinched just slightly, then turned to Mila, looking for backup. "Sean. She's not like us. She never was." And then came the words that carved a hollow into my chest. "Sean. You're holding me back, Dorothy. Mila gets me. She actually believes in what I can be." I didn't cry. I did not shout. The humiliation was sharp, but silent, cutting through me in clean lines. I looked at him, really looked, and realized how small he suddenly seemed. "Dorothy, then go. Be who you think you can be. Just don't come back when the mirror cracks." I turned and walked away, my heels clicking against the marble floor, every step an exhale of 5 years I should have never held on to. Behind me, I could hear Ethan's awkward laugh, Sean's muttered defense, Mila's low, triumphant whisper. None of it mattered anymore. Outside, the night air was cold and alive. The city stretched out before me. Lights, noise, freedom. I stood there for a long time, my heart pounding, realizing something I'd never felt before. This wasn't heartbreak, it was release. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for him to come home. I was finally ready to leave. The next morning, the apartment felt like a stranger's house. The sunlight fell across the living room in thin, dusty lines, illuminating the ghost of our life. The half-full coffee mug, he'd left his jacket slung over the chair, the photo of us laughing at the beach 2 summers ago. It was strange how quickly love could turn into clutter. I stood there for a long time before I moved. No tears, no screams, just quiet determination, the kind that comes after you've run out of ways to hurt. By noon, I had already changed the locks. By 2, I was knee-deep in cardboard boxes, sorting through 5 years of what I once thought was forever. Each item was a tiny betrayal in disguise. The sweater I bought him after his first big presentation, the one he said made him feel unstoppable. The ceramic mug he'd painted for me, chipped at the rim from a date I thought was special. And the notebook full of sketches and plans for our future business, though now every word felt like fiction. I packed his clothes first, then his books, his gadgets, the little souvenirs from our trips. With each box, I sealed. The apartment grew quieter, lighter, as if it was exhaling with me. But when I reached the framed photos, I hesitated. My hand hovered over one of us, smiling at a rooftop cafe sunlight on our faces. That was before the resentment, before the parties, before Mila. I stared at it until my reflection blurred into hers. Then I whispered, "I hope you find whatever you're chasing," and dropped it face down into the box. That evening, my phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from Sean. Then a message. "Sean, can we talk? I think we overreacted last night." I almost laughed. Then another came. "Sean, you changed the lock seriously, Dorothy. This is childish." Then finally, "Sean, I'll come by tomorrow for my stuff." I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked his number. Then I deleted it, the digital equivalent of closing a door. The silence that followed was both terrifying and sacred. It was the first time in years the apartment had been truly mine. No arguments, no background. Hum of his voice on the phone, no restless pacing about big plans, just the faint sound of the clock ticking like the heartbeat of a new beginning. But nights were the hardest. I'd crawl into bed and instinctively reach for the empty space beside me, my fingers brushing cold sheets. Some nights I'd dream about him, not the real Sean, but the one I used to believe in. The man who once kissed my forehead after a long day and said, "You make everything make sense." That version of him no longer existed. Maybe he never did. A few days later, I came home from work and found a note slipped under my door. "You don't have to hate me, Dorothy. I'm sorry for how things ended. I needed more. You'll understand someday." I read it once, then again, and then without ceremony tore it into pieces and dropped it in the trash. There was no rage, just relief. Because that note wasn't an apology. It was permission for him, not for me. I realized then that I didn't owe him forgiveness. I only owed myself peace. In the weeks that followed, I filled my silence with motion. Morning jogs, cleaning sprees, rewatching old shows I used to love but stopped because he called them boring. Slowly, my body began to remember how it felt to live without flinching. My laughter came back small and hesitant at first, like testing a broken wing. But every now and then, when the city was quiet and the apartment felt too big, I'd catch myself whispering into the emptiness. He said I was holding him back, but maybe I was the one keeping him from falling. One Saturday, I boxed up the last of his things, a drawer full of random cables, receipts, and one silver keychain that said "Dream Big." I almost kept it. Instead, I left it on top of the final box like a tiny gravestone for a dream that died quietly in our hands. When the moving truck came, I stood by the window and watched as his boxes disappeared into the back. No tears, no shaking, just stillness. That was the moment it hit me. I hadn't lost him. I'd finally found myself. It's strange how silence can sound deafening when you've spent years living inside someone else's noise. For the first time in a long while, I could hear myself think, and at first I didn't like what I heard. There were moments when I'd wake up and forget for half a second that Sean was gone. My brain would still expect the faint sound of him typing, the smell of his cologne, the hum of his restless dreams. Then reality would set in, a heavy kind of quiet. But underneath that quiet, something fragile was taking shape. Peace. It began with small things. I stopped cooking for 2. I stopped buying his favorite cereal. I replaced the coffee mug he chipped with one that said, "Do it for yourself." It wasn't defiance, it was reclamation. I started going to the gym not to chase revenge, but to burn through the heaviness sitting in my chest. At first, I couldn't run for more than 10 minutes without thinking about him, but one morning I realized an entire playlist had finished and I hadn't thought of him once. That's when I smiled for the first time in months. Work became my new sanctuary. Before I used to rush home early because Sean didn't like eating alone. Now I stayed late, losing myself in lines of code that actually listened to logic unlike love. I volunteered for a new project, something complex and ambitious. And for once, instead of hearing his voice in my head say, "You're playing it safe," I heard my own whisper, "Watch me." The late nights weren't lonely anymore. They were alive with quiet purpose, the glow of my monitor, the soft rhythm of typing the hum of progress. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. A few weeks later, I reconnected with Lily, a friend Sean had quietly pushed away. She used to invite us over for game nights, but he always said, "They're not our kind of people." When I texted her out of the blue, she replied instantly, "Girl, finally. I've been waiting for this day." That weekend, we met at a tiny ramen shop we used to love in college. When she saw me, she hugged me so tight I nearly cried. We talked for hours, not about him, but about everything else I'd forgotten. I cared about music, travel plans, laughter. Lily. "You look lighter, Dorothy." Happier. Dorothy smiling. It's weird. I think I'm finally running my own race. By the time we said goodbye, I realized I hadn't mentioned Sean once. It felt like washing salt water off a wound that had already started to heal. One night as I was cleaning, I found a note in an old drawer, my handwriting on a torn scrap of paper. "Be patient. He just needs time to see your worth." I stared at it for a long moment before whispering, "He did," and he walked away anyway. Then I folded the paper, struck a match, and watched it burn over the sink. The flame flickered out fast, like the end of something that had already been gone too long. By month 3, my reflection had changed. My posture was straighter, my eyes clearer. When coworkers complimented me, I didn't deflect or shrink. I said thank you. Confidence felt unfamiliar, but it fit. One afternoon, my boss called me into her office. "Boss Dorothy, your work on the new backend project has been incredible. We're promoting you to lead developer." For a second, I didn't believe it. Not because I thought I didn't deserve it, but because for years I'd been told I wasn't enough unless someone else said so. Now I believed it first. That night, I opened a bottle of wine alone, not to toast to success, but to survival. The kind of quiet victory that comes from realizing you're still standing after everything tried to break you. Sometimes late at night, I'd scroll through old photos. Not to torture myself, but to see them clearly for what they were. 2 people smiling in snapshots that didn't match their reality. He was always leaning forward in the pictures, chasing something ahead. And I was always the one leaning toward him, trying to keep up. Now when I take pictures, I stand centered. No chasing, no waiting, just me. I thought healing would feel like triumph. But it was softer than that, like the quiet after a storm. A peace so still, it almost scared me. And somewhere deep inside that stillness, I heard a whisper of truth. "You didn't lose him, Dorothy, you outgrew him." 3 months passed before I heard his name again. It came not from Sean himself, but from an unexpected source, Ethan, his loud-mouthed best friend who had once looked at me like I was an anchor tied to Sean's ankle. It was a Wednesday evening. I was at my desk finishing a project when my phone buzzed. "Ethan, hey, I know this is random, but Sean's going through a rough time. Maybe reach out." I stared at the message for a long moment, my cursor blinking on an empty screen. I hadn't seen or spoken to Sean since that night at the party. The idea of reaching out felt absurd, like revisiting a fire to make sure it still burned. So I replied, "Dorothy, I don't think that's a good idea. I hope he figures things out." A minute later, 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. And that was the last I heard from Ethan. The next few days, little whispers about Sean began to surface through mutual friends. Apparently, Mila's crypto empire had collapsed. Turns out she wasn't a visionary, just another self-proclaimed genius running a pyramid of illusions. Investors lost money, lawsuits followed, and Sean, her so-called partner, was caught in the crossfire. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. But I did sit there for a long time that night, sipping tea, thinking about how poetic it all was. He'd traded a woman who loved him for one who loved attention. And attention, like currency, eventually runs out. 2 weeks later, I received the first message from Sean himself. It was short, almost timid. "Sean, I'm sorry, I messed up." I didn't reply. A few hours later, another message. "Sean, you probably hate me. I deserve that. I just wanted to say I think about you a lot." The old me would have been torn apart by those words. guilt, empathy, nostalgia, all tangled together. But the new me only felt distance, like reading a letter addressed to someone who'd moved away long ago. Over the next few days, his messages trickled in, each more desperate than the last. Sean. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Sean. I can't believe I threw it all away. Sean. Please, Dorothy. Can we talk? I need to explain. Sean. He wasn't who I thought he was. Mila ruined me. When I didn't respond, his tone shifted, remorse giving way to resentment. Sean, why are you being so cold? You think you're better than me now, Sean? It was just one mistake. You act like you're perfect. Sean. You're heartless. I thought you had compassion. I read each message once, then deleted it. No anger, no satisfaction, just clarity. Because every word he sent reminded me that this wasn't about love, it was about control. He wasn't apologizing because he missed me. He was apologizing because he missed what I made him feel safe, admired, whole. The kind of peace you only notice after you've destroyed it. Weeks later, I saw his name pop up again, this time in a group chat with mutual friends. A photo had surfaced of him looking worn out, thinner, sitting at a cheap cafe. Someone commented, "Crazy how fast people fall." Someone else replied, "Karma always collects." I didn't reply, but deep down a truth pulsed quietly. Karma isn't revenge, it's balance. And he was finally standing where I once stood at the bottom, watching everything he built crumble. One night, I caught myself scrolling through his old photos, not because I missed him, but because I wanted to understand the person I once loved. The captions were all the same. Hustle, chase dreams, no limits. But in his latest photo, there were no hashtags, just a simple line, starting over. It didn't sting, didn't warm me either. It just was. That's when I realized something important. I had stopped waiting for him to hurt and started living for myself. His story was looping in circles, but mine was finally moving forward. The next morning, my alarm went off at 6. I tied my hair, slipped on my sneakers, and went for a run under the rising sun. Each step was steady, rhythmic, a quiet mantra repeating in my head. He lost me once, he won't find me again. And for the first time, it didn't sound bitter. It sounded like freedom. It was almost a year before I saw him again. Time had done its work, not by erasing him, but by softening the edges of memory until he no longer felt like a wound, just a lesson. It happened at Lily's wedding. She had been one of the first people to help me rebuild after the breakup, the kind of friend who didn't ask for explanations, only showed up with food and laughter. When her invitation arrived, I hesitated at first. Part of me wasn't ready to step back into the same social circles that once defined us. But another part, stronger, now wanted to see if I could. Not for him, but for me. The ballroom shimmered with soft lights and the scent of roses. I arrived with Philip, my boyfriend of 6 months, a quiet, grounded architect who made calm feel exciting. He didn't need to be seen. He just needed to see me. We walked in hand, and for once I didn't feel the need to compare myself to anyone else in the room. That's when I saw him. Sean. He was standing near the bar, half hidden behind a group of old acquaintances. His once polished suit hung loose on him. His posture, once proud and eager, now slumped, with a kind of tired humility. He looked like a man trying to blend into a life that no longer wanted him. Our eyes met. He froze, mid-sip glass, trembling slightly in his hand. Then he smiled, small, nervous, uncertain. I nodded politely and turned back toward Philip. But fate, as always, loves a scene. As I was getting drinks later, Sean approached. His voice was soft, too soft. Sean, Dorothy. Wow, you look amazing. Dorothy. Thank you. It's been a while. He glanced toward Philip, who was across the room chatting with Lily's husband. Sean, is that your new boyfriend? Dorothy, smiling. Yes. Philip. Sean. He seems nice. Dorothy. He is. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, just full of ghosts. He finally exhaled, looking down at his drink. Sean, I'm sorry, Dorothy. For everything. For what I said, for how I treated you. I was stupid, Dorothy. You were lost. There's a difference. He looked up, eyes wet with regret. Sean, Mila left. Took what was left of my savings and disappeared. My friends, too. I lost everything. I should have listened to you, Dorothy. You didn't need to listen to me, Sean. You just needed to stop mistaking chaos for passion. He flinched not out of anger, but realization. Sean, I thought I was chasing success. Turns out I was just running from myself. He paused, voice breaking. Sean, you were the only person who ever really saw me. Can we start over? Maybe just talk, get coffee sometime. There it was, the plea I once dreamed of hearing. But now it didn't sound like redemption. It sounded like repetition. I looked at him, the man who once made me question my worth, and all I felt was calm. Dorothy, you know you once told me I was holding you back, that I was just a stepping stone. He winced, nodding slowly. Sean, yeah, I remember. Dorothy. You were right. I was a stepping stone, but not for you, for me. He blinked confused. Dorothy softly. You taught me what I never want again. You taught me that love shouldn't make me smaller. You were the bridge I had to cross to find myself. For a moment he looked like he might cry, but I didn't feel satisfaction, only release. Sean, that's not fair. Dorothy, fairness was never the problem, Sean. Clarity was. Philip returned, then slipping an arm around my waist, his touch, natural, unspoken. Sean's eyes followed the motion, not with envy, but with something quieter. Acceptance, maybe. Philip smiling. Hey, everything okay, Dorothy? Perfect. Sean swallowed hard. Sean. He's lucky. Dorothy meeting his gaze. No. I'm lucky, because I finally stopped trying to be enough for someone who didn't know what enough looked like. I gave him a faint smile, the kind that said goodbye without words, and walked away hand in hand with the life I built for myself. As we drove home that night, the city lights flickered past the car window. Philip hummed softly to a song on the radio, his hand resting over mine. And for the first time in years, I realized something. Sean hadn't broken me. He'd forged me. Every wound he left had become a map leading straight to peace. The morning after Lily's wedding, I woke up to soft sunlight spilling across the sheets, the smell of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. Philip was humming under his breath, something he did when he thought no one was listening. For a second, I just lay there, eyes closed, letting the sound fill me. It was gentle, steady, real. The kind of peace I once thought didn't exist. Later, as I sat by the window with my mug in hand, I thought about Sean. Not with anger, not with longing, just reflection. He had been my beginning and my breaking point. And maybe that was always his role in my story, to be the mistake that taught me my worth. I thought back to the night he called me safe. Back then it felt like an insult. Now it felt like a crown. Because being safe didn't mean being small. It meant being whole, grounded in a world full of people addicted to chaos. In the weeks that followed, life unfolded quietly. I took on new projects at work, traveled with Philip, called my parents more often, laughed freely. My world didn't shrink after him, it expanded. Without realizing it, I'd started saying yes to things again. Not out of obligation, but out of curiosity. One afternoon, Lily sent me a message with a photo attached. It was from her wedding, a candid shot of Philip and me on the dance floor. He was laughing, head thrown back. I was looking up at him with an expression I barely recognized on my self-unguarded joy. Her message read, "You look like peace found a person." I stared at that photo for a long time, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. Not sad tears, grateful ones. Because peace didn't arrive in grand gestures. It arrived in quiet rooms, honest conversations, and mornings that didn't hurt anymore. Every now and then, I still heard little updates about Sean. A friend mentioned he'd started freelancing, trying to rebuild his career from scratch. No big talk, no flashy promises, no new Mila, just him, humbled, trying to start over. And strangely, I wished him well. Because karma had already done what it needed to, it showed him what life looks like without the people who carried him. He used to think the world owed him brilliance. Now he was learning the value of earning peace. The same lesson I learned just from the other side. One evening, Philip and I went for a walk by the river. The city lights shimmered on the water, soft and restless. We stopped by a bench overlooking the skyline. He looked at me and asked quietly, "Philip, if you could go back, would you change anything?" I smiled, shaking my head. Dorothy, no. Because everything I lost led me here. He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. And as I looked out at the city, the same one that once felt so cold and lonely, it finally looked like home. Love had once broken me open, but in the spaces it left behind, something stronger grew. Understanding, boundaries, grace. I stopped needing to be someone's dream and became my own reality. I realized that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't success or attention. It's peace. It's waking up one morning and realizing you haven't thought about them in weeks. It's laughing freely, loving softly, and never again mistaking chaos for passion. Before bed that night, I wrote a single line in my journal, a habit I'd picked up again. He got his karma. I found my peace. I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the quiet wrap around me. For the first time in years, there were